Welcome to the Got Trauma Podcast with your hosts, Courtney K. and Monica Newland.
Hello, hello, hello. We are back with another episode.
Yes, we are.
Good morning, good morning. Or I guess it's not morning anymore. It's
No,
afternoon
we always
now.
think it's morning when it's not.
Well, it's because the day goes by so fast, I think, for me.
Yeah,
I'm
probably.
always like, oh yeah, it's like, I can't believe it's 12:45 when we're filming this.
It always goes by fast when your kids are at school and you know they're going to be home soon and you have a billion things that you want to do before the pitter patter of their little feet run through the door.
Yeah, exactly. So hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another episode. A little quick announcement. We have decided to post in our, right now it's just in our community page, and we have it in our bios on our social media pages, how you can participate in a future podcast episode. So if you're looking to be a guest on a future episode, please check out those links. There is a bit of like a brief questionnaire sort of thing that we do require if you do want to be on the podcast, but we are starting to look forward and happy with people who are interested in being on our podcast. That's pretty exciting for us.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. And so today's topic is about trauma triggers. Again, we asked our community, our beautiful Facebook community, what they wanted to hear about, and trauma triggers, what they are and how to identify them was sort of the next most popular thing that people wanted to hear about. So that is what we're going to be discussing today, talking a bit about what that looks like for us, what we've experienced, how we've been triggered, how often it happens, and that sort of thing.
Feels like it's too often.
Yeah, well, this is just it, right? That's why I think it's a pretty important topic to discuss, because when you start to look at these things and you realize like just maybe how often that's happening.
I'm triggered talking about triggers, so there's that.
Yeah.
I'm having a panic. It's so funny. I'm instantly like my inside is just like.
Yeah, well, your lighting's better today, so that can hopefully set your anxiety at ease a little bit, because your lighting's much better. I do like the background you got going on.
Thank you.
Groovy pictures in the back. But yeah, no flashy lights this time, so that's good.
I think that it had to do, honestly, with the
entity in the house.
Well, it was that's what you think it was. I'm still not sold on that. I actually think it's because the clouds were rolling really fast because it was windy. So it was like sunny. So it was just, the light just kept catching weird. And then it would go all psycho.
Yeah, it was.
So hopefully this is better.
Today will be better.
Yes.
So we're talking about trauma triggers, what they are, what they look like. And so for just high level, what are triggers? And they are generally a response that you have like emotionally or physically that can look like a form of like fear or panic or agitation, or like you get like really thrown off by a certain situation. You may become like panicked or feel like overwhelmed and unsafe in a certain environment, because it's sort of like a flashback. It's sort of like a flashback to something that's happened in your life, or a circumstance that's happened in your life, and what you're experiencing in that moment is sort of it's a reminder of what you have experienced. Yeah. So hopefully that is clear enough. But we're gonna, as we discuss more about like what those have looked like for us, it'll give a little bit more perspective. And as always, we'll put some information in the show notes as to like a little bit more detail about like what these things look like, and if you are trying to identify if what you've experienced is a trigger, then hopefully that'll provide some information between our discussion and those resources. So
yes,
my question to you, Courtney, is were you triggered this week? Have you experienced a trigger this week?
Excuse me, sorry. This has actually been a week of triggers. So I had an amazing experience. I got to reconnect with a family member that was sort of ostracized due to, their trauma, that it should have never happened, but unfortunately it did. And just some of the conversations were really, I still feel very lit up from it. Just realizing how lied to I was, and
Oh, really?
how, yeah, just how things were so, I mean, everybody obviously has their versions of the truth and or their interpretations, right? But it's funny having these conversations with her. I kept watching and knowing that what she was saying was true, and
Mm,
that was really hard, and that
yeah.
that really hurt. I was hurt for her because you just it's so hard to explain, just seeing that, but it really, I was really triggered, and I'm still really triggered by it. I just find, I don't know.
So you had, this is a family member you had over who you sort of rekindled that
Yeah,
relationship, or you're starting to rekindle that
yeah.
relationship, and some of the stories that she had as to why your relationship, I mean, would have been younger, I guess, when
I was
that
like
sort of fell
9.
apart.
Hmm.
But like, so she was giving perspective as to why she decided to remove herself, or why you guys became removed from each other's lives, and sort of
Yeah.
what her life looked like through that time.
Yeah, and sorry, excuse me. It's just it's really hard. Oh, fuck, to put this into words. I'm finding the more that you start to dive into this stuff and you start to unravel it, it really feels like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it just brings up a lot of old stuff, and I feel like everything is just setting me off. So
Oh,
it's just, yeah, I'm
well, because
feeling
you're
that.
putting in a lot of work. Like you are, like you said, like you're doing a lot of that introspective work, and you're trying to understand things, and you're really delving into like the nitty gritty of the stories and the history as to like why you lived a life that you did. And your family had a very important part of that,
Yeah,
was the reason for a lot of these things. So I mean, fuck, that's difficult. Like that's going to be
yeah, and
heavy. It's heavy stuff.
the lack of trust I find very triggering. I didn't realize how untrusting I actually was, because everything for the most part was always a lie,
Mm,
given to me by my parents for a lot of stuff, really. And then there's like this part of you that's angry because you've missed out on all this time with this person, because somebody felt that their interpretation of the truth was more important than the actual truth.
yeah.
And like that.
And making sure that people were like removed, like
Yeah,
people. This is such a, like, it's a tricky thing because we talk about removing yourself from
yeah,
people's lives and how difficult that is. And while it's necessary at times, it's always such a mind fuck. And then on the other side, there is people who have had to, like, the other side of it, like you are removing yourself, or you are removing somebody from your life. Like it goes both ways. Like there's always the two sides of it. And so
yeah.
you're hearing it from a different family member who chose to remove themselves from your life, your family's life,
Well,
and what that
not
looks like.
not really. It wasn't her choice to remove herself from our family per se. It was more or less she had to remove herself from um you know her toxic environment, that obviously there was
Mm.
connections, right? Because it had to do with parents. But like, we didn't have to remove her. We could have
Oh,
supported
okay.
her had I.
Mm.
Like, I think it pisses me off that I was 9 and I was given information that no 9-year-old should have ever been given.
Hmm.
And then it was, basically, you know, my mom's not going to talk to this person anymore, so I can't talk to them anymore. And that happened more than once in my life with
Yeah.
different people. And it's very, it really, really, it's hard. And now these people are coming back into my life, and I'm lit up like a fucking Christmas tree because
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very triggering of all these experiences that were taken from me that I didn't get
Hmm.
to have. And it's just triggering that really deep sense of betrayal, I guess,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So that's been happening this week. So did you reach out to this person or did they reach out to you? How did that start?
I reached out to them a while ago, and yeah, we just started talking. Like, this is a person that I absolutely adored as a child. Like, I absolutely adored. Spent a lot of like Christmas, that kind of holidays together, and just a safe person. They were definitely a sense of safety for me. So again, when that was taken away, that was, really hard.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
took a long time to rekindle that because I was so fucking conditioned by the person that took them away from me in the first place.
Right.
So, yeah, it's been a week of just kind of going through the motions of these things and feeling the sort of, I guess resentment would be a good way to put it. And, you don't want to, it's not that you want to like live in the past and what the things that you can't control, because you can't change it. But I do feel like there has to be a grievance there. You do have to grieve these things as they come up. Have anger towards it, have sadness towards it, be able to feel those emotions fully. It's just really uncomfortable and I don't like it.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
that's what I'm struggling with right now, because it's very fresh. So,
and so was this person, I guess like and this is not like exactly about triggers, but I have experienced, because I chose to question certain things growing up, I was attacked for it.
yeah.
So I'm wondering if this person who was in your life, the reason why she was removed is because she could see the bullshit. She could see what was happening and she was questioning it, and that wasn't met well. Oftentimes when you're dealing with like in my case as a narcissist, when I was questioning like, hey, like why are we doing this, or why is this happening, or why are you doing this? It's always met was always met with like hostility and like a lot of anger. And then I was feeling very like removed from that person's life over and over and over again. Like that wall was getting built up because I was questioning the activities. The trust was going down. My confidence in that person was going down. I'm talking about my mother. Like it's a very confusing situation. And I wonder if this person experienced something similar in relation to your family. But I mean, that's a bit of a bold statement. I don't know this person, but
Yeah, no, it was more or less they came to my mother for support, is to just to discuss what was happening, and it was just, I honestly am not 100% sure how. I just know what I was told after I knew that they had this meeting, and after I was just told that my mom had given me, again, like I said, too much detail, and I was really confused by it because it didn't make sense to me. And yeah, I was, again, like, because this just happened. It was happening a lot in my life. Like I said, I had another aunt who was kicked out of our lives, and she was kicked out because she was speaking up about what she was seeing and that she wasn't happy with it, and that it was incredibly irresponsible. Sorry. Oof. I'm really
so like would you say
there.
right now, like, yeah, like you're feeling triggered, like
Oh, immensely.
So what are you feeling?
Well, my heart is pounding and my palms are sweaty. Ha, I sound like the Eminem song. Except no vomit on my shoes, mom's spaghetti. Anyway, I just had to say that. Sorry. I just had to. That was so fucking cheesy. I couldn't even help myself.
I
No,
appreciate
I just talking about this stuff. It's funny because I'm like looking at triggers and I'm triggered looking at the word triggered. And I think it's just because this was a big deal this weekend, having this meeting, and it was beautiful and I loved it and I was so grateful for it. But yeah, again, when you're unraveling, that's, I find, when you really hit triggers, and things come up, and all of a sudden you're reminded of something that it wasn't pleasant, and then you're kind of you're going through. It's such a weird, I don't know.
Well, it's like a
hard to,
flashback. I think that's like the
yes,
best like
yeah,
way
absolutely,
to really like simply put it is like a flashback. So
yeah,
you're talking about like your heart's pounding and
yeah,
you get like that sort of like confusion as to like what's going on, why
yeah,
am I feeling this? And then one of the important things to do and things that have worked for me is okay, so I have to, the hardest part, which is the very hardest part, is to stop yourself
yeah,
and just like evaluate it. Like you can't necessarily stop those feelings, but you gotta like try to pull yourself out of the moment for a second and say, okay, wait, what is it that I'm experiencing? Okay, I'm experiencing a trigger. Okay, that's what this is. Why am I experiencing it? Oh, because I'm in this environment or whatever it has caused this. I understand that that is a trigger for me. I understand that this isn't the same space that I'm in today that I experienced in my past.
yeah,
And so I am safe here now.
yeah.
And
I have to do that too.
yeah.
And I do find it hard. And maybe the difference in this situation is, um, it's hard because the situations were never true, and now the truth is coming out.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah, the
like
truth is ugly and
it's almost like
it's uncomfortable.
you're reliving something, but you're reliving it differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's triggering because you've experienced it, but now there's this other element of it where you're experiencing it also through a different lens.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just this double whammy. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has experienced that, but if you have, I'm really sorry, because it fucking sucks really
Yeah.
bad.
It's so uncomfortable.
So, and I mean, again, the experience is beautiful. I'm so grateful to have this person back in my life. It's wonderful. It just is really shitty that, I had to, I guess, be lied
Like
to, really.
discover this information. Yeah.
Yeah, just, like I was treated like an adult way before I ever got to be a child. So
Mm-hmm.
that, I find, is really hard because, I should have been doing kid things and not thinking about the things that were put in my head.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's like a whole other and I'm sure there's like a lot of psychology behind why a parent would do that to a child that I'm like I don't know why that would ever be the case. Like why your parent would decide to not ever give you the opportunity to be a child is so bizarre. Um and it's so confusing. And I think when you become a parent and you recognize like I want my child to be a child for as long as possible, it's again going back to the mother wounds that we spoke about
Yep.
in the previous episode. It's like, you're why would a parent ever want that? You want your child to be a child forever. I want my babies to
Yep.
be babies forever, and robbing them of that is so unfair. And when you're recognizing that that's what's been taken from you, it's all those feelings of resentment and anger and hurt and sadness and grief, like all of that is so valid because you're fully getting the picture of things you've missed and what things were taken. And that's so
Yep.
hard. I'm so sorry because that's so hard.
It's, yeah. Like I said, I was like just really lit up. It's funny, again, going into this particular episode and talking about, like, that all just kind of came out because I was feeling extremely wound up about it. And yeah, oh man, what do you do, right? This is the stuff, this is the work, this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like. And I mean, it's yucky.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do
Well,
feel like it's important for people to see people in the work and see them going through these
yeah.
things and
And you're going
experience
through it
it
right
with
now.
them, instead of trying to, be someone that just slaps a label on it, or an
And
antidote is like,
here's a
here you
handbook. Here you
go.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. To actually
No.
see it and know that, yeah, it's hard, but it's worth it. I mean, in another probably couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
my nervous system will reset itself. Like I haven't been sleeping either because I keep waking up thinking. My brain's just like lit up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah.
And I think, too, when you are in the thick of it, so this is a new scenario for you. That's all sort of part of the bigger picture of things, but this is like sort of a new piece for you. And so when you're going through it and trying to understand it and understand like the stickiness and like the complications that come with that, of how it's affected you, how it's affected other family members, this is something, when you get the information, you are able to better prepare yourself and to better handle yourself and to handle those triggers, because you're recognizing. So when you're understanding that, okay, this is the scenario, I'm reacting like this because of this, and you have that like knowledge, I guess, then
Yeah.
you're able to like better handle it for yourself and to prepare yourself. But you still go through it. Like
Well,
you still
exactly.
go through that, and there's
Yeah.
not really, I mean, I don't know how to not go through it. I don't know what sort of magic tricks there might be that people have been able to implement to like magically go through it better.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say now that I know what triggers are and I understand how they work in relation with fight or flight mode, especially. I
Mm-hmm.
can, like you were saying, easier to just go, okay, I'm safe now. This
Yeah.
is just, it's just a it's just a moment of, feeling that feeling. And I mean, it doesn't ever, necessarily have to be a flashback of, like a vision, or you see something. It can be as simple as a feeling. It's a really uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
feeling that just,
Yeah.
and that's what I was experiencing, was this very uncomfortable feeling of just, having to just figure all this stuff out for myself, and, just being incredibly hurt again is really, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I am like, I don't know if I have allergies or a cold or what, but I keep the last, again. And also too, I feel like sometimes this stuff comes out physically, literally.
Mm-hmm.
That's like,
Well,
I usually get sick after a big like epiphany of some sort.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I mentioned before that I had like a full-blown autoimmune flare-up after one of the most recent episodes that we did. So I do believe that, like, yeah, the body keeps a score,
Oh fuck yeah, it
and
does.
that you're gonna, experience things not just like mentally, but physically. Sometimes your body doesn't know how to process it. It's gonna do a bunch of weird shit.
Yeah, well, it's just funny. I find as soon as I start talking about this stuff, that's when I start feeling like stuffy, and I start feeling
Mm-hmm.
like my air isn't moving, and I know like that's part of just having the anxiety of how this feeling makes me feel.
Mm-hmm.
Is really the gist of it. It's just so uncomfortable. And again, I'll work through it. I do it a lot faster than I used to, because I never even knew what a trigger was. It would be
Right.
like a conversation with my mom where I would have this horrible feeling afterwards that would just, bring on a full blown panic attack,
Yeah.
and not be able to, I'm like popping lorazepam like it's candy because I don't know what the fuck's going on. And then I got to
Yeah.
this point where I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I need to identify how I can stop this as it starts. Right. And I
Yeah.
mean, obviously I can catch it.
Or manage it. I think
I can
manage
manage it a
is
hell
the,
of a lot better.
yeah.
I barely use lorazepam anymore.
Mm-hmm.
My techniques are, I go to, like, there are happiness triggers too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Definitely.
like the triggers that make you happy. So I try to, replace that one with the other. So,
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy watching 90 Day Fiance curled up in bed. That's a happiness trigger for me.
Yeah.
So if I'm feeling
That's
super
funny.
overwhelmed, to just distract myself with garbage television. It's
I
wonderful.
watch Selling Sunset. I'm like obsessed with Selling
Mm.
Sunset. I just
Yeah,
I like that
too.
it's got real estate and business, but then like also like these big fancy lives and these beautiful women and like they
Lots of
just
drama. Lots of
there's
drama.
lots of drama. Like it just is like mindless. Like I don't like engage. My husband just like doesn't get it. He's like, why are you watching this stuff? Like
Oh,
they're just like
yeah, mine
fighting and
too.
it's bitchy and everything. And I'm like, honestly, I'm not even paying attention to that part. Like that I don't even like notice.
Yeah.
But yeah. So having like, you know, things that are, you know, good for yourself that makes you feel good because
Yeah.
you do have to give yourself a lot of grace when you're going through these moments. And I have found it very helpful to be able to share that with the people who are in my life at the time. Like if
Yeah.
it's, you know, if I'm having
Excuse me.
a reaction or like a trigger to something, if there's
Yeah.
somebody who's with me at the time, like I just tell them like, okay, like I need to just take 5 minutes or I need to I didn't realize that what was happening was so triggering for me and that I need to just take a few. And
Yeah.
just acknowledging that, like, I mean, this is usually with my husband, of course. And so like he's like it doesn't even like face up. He's just like, oh yeah, okay, good. Like no big deal. And then like obviously he doesn't have the same things as me. So for him, he doesn't really get it. So it's like he's easy to like move through those situations. So like one thing I can think of that's like very regular is my 2 kids like screaming. I've mentioned this before, like when they're screaming and they're fighting and they're crying. The crying is a big one for me. It reminds me so much of the chaos growing up and all the fighting that I like I feel like very like suffocated.
Yep.
And I feel like I start to almost like black out, like something like it's like a blackout curtain goes in front of my eyes and I'm like almost like dizzy where I'm like, whoa, like I can't function in this minute. And it's like sensory overload.
Yep.
I've learned, and you know, doing my research and things, like I've learned that that's what these things are. But then my husband, he grew up with a big family and it was always busy and like lots of stuff going on. He does not have nearly the same reaction. Also, he doesn't have the same trauma. But he's able to move through that. So, I mean, that helps that he's not also going through the same thing as me. But he supports that, you know, so being a little bit open and candid about what you're experiencing, I think if you have a safe space to be able to do that in is important. Reflecting upon what it is that you've experienced. We have our you know podcast community group that we offer as a safe space for people to have those moments of reflection or questions about what they're going through, just so that people can it's not like an advice page. It's just really that like this happened, I think that might be this, or I don't know what this is, or has that anything, you know, just like feeling like you have some community and some support, I think is like, it definitely helps a lot.
You're super glitchy, eh?
Oh, am I?
Yeah. You just froze about 3 times. Sorry, just bear with me because I'm phlegmy all of a sudden. Yeah, what you were saying is very true. And again, I have heard sometimes where people, when talking about triggers, it's, you know, you got to deal with that. You got to get over it. And it's like, that's not fair to tell somebody that. It's not easy to just get over it. It's easy to move through it, you know, eventually, and to be able to not be as affected by it. But I don't feel, I mean, some triggers for sure you can probably move through pretty quick and be completely, you know, they don't phase you anymore. But deeper wounds come with deeper scars. So, you know, that's just the way it is. I don't think that there's
and take longer to heal from.
Well, exactly. And maybe never be fully healed from it. And that's okay too. It's important that your triggers are your triggers and that you don't take them out on other people. You know, you can't make other people the target of what you're experiencing. Be, like you said, find some support, have a good support system. Like, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I have a great support system at home too for when these things come up. But, you know, I mean, but I have in the past, trigger pounced on people because
I have. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's
and
important
still
to
catch
identify.
myself doing it.
Yeah. 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 That's
I mean, at the end of the day, it's the like introspective work that you're doing on yourself, that, you know, if you want to manage these things, that's what you have to do. You have
Absolutely.
to try
You
to
have to own
understand it. You have to understand what your situation is, which is, to your point about your story earlier about you're trying to understand things. Maybe not understand the whys for things, but you're trying to understand why you are the way you are or have these triggers, and you're finding out pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Whether or not you'll understand why they happened in the first place is different. But you putting those pieces together is not going to stop you from experiencing those triggers, but it's going to give you some foundation for
Yeah.
being able to manage those things moving
Exactly.
forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's really, at the end of the day, we're actually going to do another episode on really practical techniques and things that you can do in the moments of experiencing triggers or experiencing like anxiety. And, when you're in bouts of depression, like some things that have worked for us in order to manage that situation a little bit better. We're just going to do sort of a, high level quick summary of it so that you have like a bunch of techniques all in one episode.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's helpful for people who, are looking for some new techniques, and we're just going to share things that have worked for us. But what have you done this week that, since then, other than like sitting in it and doing some reflecting, but what have you done to sort of manage
Just
that?
my Reiki and watching 90 Day Fiance. That helps. Smut television, honestly, is just such a gem. That was the other thing I was going to mention that popped in my head. Do you ever get where you're watching something, like say you're watching like a movie and there's like a really dysfunctional family, and you're watching it? Do you ever get fully triggered by that? Because I do.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I can't. Sometimes I'm just
you're like looking, you're like reading between the lines, and you're like, whoa, like this is not. Yeah, like there's way more to this. Yeah, I try to not. I spent a lot of time, I think, at one point, really analyzing other people's situations, and that was also very draining. Not like on purpose. It was just that as I was learning these things, I was able to point things out a little bit. Not that I was pointing things out to other families.
Yeah.
But I was able to like see situations,
identify it,
recognize things a little bit better, identify what these things sort of are. And I was spending like, an unnecessary amount of energy trying to understand other people's scenarios, and probably trying to make me feel a little bit better about mine, a little bit less sad about mine, because I'm like, oh, well, they have all these problems too, right? And that was a useless point of my time, because like it didn't benefit me at all. It didn't make me feel better about myself, and it didn't make me feel better about anybody else's situations, that's for sure. But you sort of fall into like, how bad is my situation, and like you try to have some sort of like analysis about like, okay, well, if you can comparatively compare your situation to somebody else's situation, then maybe it'll give you some insight or some relief. But often it doesn't, and often it is only you just spending time on other negative BS. So that's what
exactly. I find it funny, like I obviously coming from the upbringing I had, I always wanted to have this sort of leave it to beaver family dynamic, and that was never going to happen. And you realize that's not real anyway. I mean, there may be a few people out there that have it about as close to that, but I mean, that's bullshit. Nothing's perfect, and that's the problem
for our early listeners. Leave It to Beaver's like an old show that was like this beautiful family. It was like black and white, I'm pretty sure
it was black and white. I loved it.
Yeah, I remember it when we were really young. But it was like of the perfect, picture perfect family, and like what their life looked like. And I mean, social media and things like that portray.
I was going to say Facebook is pretty much the modern day Leave It to Beaver. A bunch of, a lot of what do you know? I don't want to say facade necessarily, just a cover picture. You know what I mean? Like what goes on behind the scenes is not at all what's actually, right in your face. And I mean, that's with everything, obviously. So sometimes I find that triggering.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
just
for sure. Because you, again, that comparativeness, when you're doing that comparison, like, yeah, it's like you're unnecessarily hurting yourself.
yeah, exactly. I'm really good at
yeah,
that. So
it is, again, when you're looking at people and what they're doing, and, we're, as a society, we're so involved in everybody's life and through social media. And, obviously we want to support each other, but you can unnecessarily spend time. I guess that was my point earlier. It's like you unnecessarily are spending time looking at these things and putting a lot of value on it when it's not really,
yeah,
you don't really have the full picture, right?
exactly.
And to our point about what triggers, when you're first identifying what triggers are, and identifying that you have trauma triggers, it is because you don't really have you haven't put all the pieces together. You haven't
Yep.
had that full perspective. So like, I'll just use myself as the example. Like, growing up with a really dysfunctional and chaotic environment, things like loud noises, or I mean, I could go on. Like, what are other,
Yeah.
people who are like questioning me, people who are telling me that I should be thinking of things this way, because the narrative growing up was like, you're a child and you don't understand, but then and making me sort of really question things, but then also being put in scenarios where I had to make really adult decisions, which was also like a very difficult thing to manage. But so now I find like I have triggers in different ways than I did when I was a child, like, or not a child, but when I did, when in, like, say, my adolescence. I was very confrontational, because I was so used to like the fighting. So
Yep.
that was
Oh,
very
yeah.
natural for me
Me
to
too.
do.
Yep.
But then that would also cause me to be triggered, because then I would be unnecessarily, confrontational, because I expected things to be so elevated all the time.
Yep.
And it took me quite some time to realize that, like, whoa, like, not every situation is going to be that terrible. Like, yeah,
Yep.
it's normal to have people, share their points of view and to have some sort of like conflict, but for it to not be to
It doesn't
what
have to be
you had
escalated.
like,
Yeah.
it's not what you experienced when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, being like told that I didn't like, I had no business trying to understand what was happening. Like,
Yeah.
this one's kind of like difficult to like articulate, but I was always very confused as to what the situation was in my home, because every day it was always different. Waking up, it was like,
Yeah.
who's going to be here? Is my mom going to be home? What do I have to do today? What sort of chaos is going to like unravel? And being told that like that wasn't valid, I found later on in life, when I would question certain things and people would say like, oh, well, don't worry about it.
Ooh.
I would be very triggered.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't realize that was because of how I've been treated growing up,
Yep.
and as a child. So,
Well,
I
having
mean,
your feelings micromanaged, right?
yeah, like, yeah, it's all very confusing. I think this topic is like, there's
It's
a
a little
lot
deeper than we thought it was, to be honest.
Yeah, because I mean, trauma triggers are in the form of like, okay, so like, it can be literally like a thought
Yep.
that you have. It can be that you walk into a situation, like, say, like any situation, you walk into a situation, there's a person there who might remind you of somebody or of a situation or a time in your life. You could physically do something and all of a sudden have that flashback come about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these triggers come in a lot of different forms.
They do.
And they all mentally have like a weight to them. And it takes a lot of sorting, and really you don't know you have that trigger until you're in that situation, I find. And then you're like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah. Well, rejection triggers for me. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to this.
Yeah,
When you write
rejection
somebody
triggers.
a novel and somebody gives you a thumbs up,
Mm.
when they respond with a thumbs up. Do you know anybody who does that?
I know,
I'll write you a mini series and you give me a thumbs up. I'm like, why do you hate me? And then my
we talked about
rejection
this.
trigger is kicked into gear, and I'm like, oh
And I'm
God.
like, I had no idea,
Oh,
but
God.
this was so good that like you pointed that out because, and I will probably have to be reminded, but for me, like I'm confident in whatever you were sharing with me. So like I
Yeah.
didn't really think to go into detail or like discuss it, right? That was where I was coming from. But it was good that you shared that with me because I would never have made that connection
Yeah, it's funny.
unless you told me that. So like
Yeah,
this is the
right?
point of like making sure that you're open and honest with people in your
Exactly.
immediate circle that you if you're feeling that, like don't hold back. Like
Yeah.
fuck, there's no benefit in holding back.
No. It's
But
just
yeah,
now
the
it's a funny
rejection
joke,
wound,
right?
yeah. Well, now it is, yeah.
So now it's hilarious.
Hopefully I haven't done that lately.
No, you haven't. No, I just find it funny because I do feel like a lot of people relate to that,
Mhm.
like when somebody sends, just like K or,
Yeah, like
whatever.
really short.
And you're like, oh God, they are
Yeah.
plotting my death. They hate me. Oh
Yeah.
Lord.
And see,
Rejection
you know what,
trigger.
and this is just coming to my mind right now. I so I feel like I have had to be put in some really big scenarios in my life where I've had to make really like way beyond my capacity decisions, and
Yep.
I've had to make really big moves in my life because of circumstances. Like as an example of this, like I was the executor of my grandmother's estate. I had to deal with a lot of crazy people, including my mother. It was all very, very technical and way beyond my capacity, even though I was an adult. But when you are put in those scenarios so often, which I felt like I've had quite a few of those types of scenarios in my life, I find it difficult to fully be able to articulate like what I'm thinking because I tend to have a like trying to sort out my thoughts.
Yep.
And like social media is difficult, and like when text messaging and Facebook Messenger and all these things, like when you have like these, at least for me, like I have like multiple group chats with people, and like it seems like there's always something coming
Yep.
in, coming in, coming in, coming in, coming
Yep.
in, coming in. And then you have other conversations that are more important that are needing your time and your energy. But when you feel so depleted and you don't feel like you can like
Yep.
properly respond,
Yep.
I think I have done that where it's very short and not
Yeah,
because
I
it's
know
like
what I mean.
I'd
And
rather
that's
just respond and just like
yeah.
I'm just trying to give maybe a little bit of context. I'm really just having this realization now.
That's really cool. I think it's neat that that's what happens when we have these conversations. It's literally like these
Yeah.
realizations start pouring out. It's really
Because
interesting.
I've always been somebody who's like, my family always called me the voice of reason. And when I was like 14, I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's like not so fun when you're in your 30s and you're still being the voice of reason for adults.
No.
And like you're trying to give advice to people. And I mean, it's hard. It's because you want to be able to give advice, but like I'm often being challenged, or I felt often challenged to understand scenarios that I had no experience with and I
Yep.
had no understanding of, and I was being like kind of
You had
put
no
into
business dealing with,
positions,
right?
yeah, that I had to sort of help deal with these people. And I do think that that is a strength for me overall because I've been able to help a lot of people, and it is part of my like now like what I'm trying to do. I am trying to help people and
Yep.
use these experiences to benefit. But it also it's hard to process it all. And when you don't have like the bandwidth to like spread it out amongst so many different
Yep.
things, it's hard to like I shut down. Oftentimes I'll just shut
Yep.
down. I'll be like, I can't even open up my phone. I can't even like go there. It's been particularly hard in this past year because I've had a lot of health issues. And so really like I'm just trying to get through the day.
Yep.
And these things don't stop, right? And these feelings don't stop, and these triggers don't stop, and
Yep.
the healing doesn't stop completely, right? So
Yep.
you're, I guess, like I don't know where I kind of trailed off there, but like it's just yeah, it's
Well, you were having a big epiphany, and you took us along for the ride, and that's pretty cool. It was good to
yeah. So I guess I need to be more honest when I'm going through that. It's probably
Well, exactly, and that is it gives a different perspective for everybody, right? Because I mean, for me, a lot of the time, and I was more or less joking around, but
No, it's like start a good conversation now.
Yeah, it like it does for me, and this is with a lot of people. I find we are so connectively, is that the right word? I don't
Connected.
know, probably not. We're so connected, but so fucking disconnected at the same time. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I have to have a phone call with my best friend to have to tell my daughter to respond to a fucking text message, and this person has their phone in their face all the time,
Yeah.
right? But again, we're so disconnected at the same time as being so in this era of everybody is connected to each other within
Yeah.
seconds, right?
Yeah.
I
You
was
want
even
that instant, like that instant response. And I think that's to my point. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. That's what it is. Because
yeah,
it's like I'm getting like hammered with questions. It's like hammered with questions and hammered with scenarios and hammered.
yep,
It's like, here's all the information all the time, all the time, all the time. Here's all your
yep,
emails all the time, all the time, all the time. And it's
yep,
like, holy shit. Like, can we not just take a break? Can we not just take a breather? Like, fuck, man, I would love to go back like 30 years and recognize that, like, okay, like there's advantages and disadvantages, like where you had to pick up the phone, you had to call somebody, and
I
if it
was
was
just
busy,
gonna say that.
or like if they weren't home, like you couldn't get a hold of them for like days. If like people went
Yeah.
away on vacation for a week, like you don't talk to them for the
And
week,
you
you
didn't
talk to them when they get
panic.
back.
You
You
didn't
didn't
panic about
panic.
it. You went outside
Like
and
that, like
played.
break, I think like I have longed for that sort of like relief somehow. But then I also do it to myself because I'm
Yep.
also very connected, and I also get like hurt if people aren't responding to me,
Yeah.
and I expect instant response from other people as well, and I interpret the texting, you know, it like I misconstrue what that
Yep.
information is usually communicated like. So that's a whole thing. And then that,
Texting.
yeah, like, you know, it's like you're triggered. It's like, okay, well, I've had to, like, we've talked about like like messages from our mothers and how fucked they
Yep.
are. Having like some sort of like negative text message, you know, that you're receiving maybe is a trigger because it reminds you of some of these other things, or
Yep.
like you feel like you've been rejected, or you feel like you have, um, you're not feeling the love from somebody who you feel like you would receive that love. And
Yep.
I often think for myself, I was like, wow, I wouldn't respond like that to them. And I'm like, what? Like, yeah, but you're not them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, why do I have to remind myself of that all the time? It's like,
Well,
that's maybe
that's the
not how you
thing.
would respond, but that's how they respond.
But
And they
again, I
don't think
think
there's anything wrong with it. And there's probably nothing wrong with it. Oh,
we're just too connected. We're too connected, but so disconnected at the same time that we take these things so for granted. I mean, I'm terrible for it too. There's times I won't answer my phone's ringing. I'm not going to answer it because it gives me anxiety.
yeah.
I remember being a kid, and as soon as that phone rang, you were
It
like
was like,
flying in the air,
yeah, it was like
running
so
down
exciting.
wherever. You know, you had the super
Yeah.
long ass cord, and you even had the rotary dial.
I wonder if our parents felt anxiety from the phone ringing or not, or if they felt excitement.
You know what my
It'd be
dad used to do?
interesting.
This just made me think of this. And this makes me laugh. So when you walked into our house, like our front door was at the bottom of the stairs, and then you come up the stairs, and the phone was on the wall in the kitchen, which is probably a good like 50 feet from the front door. And if somebody called, my dad hated talking on the phone, but he'd answer the phone and it would be somebody who just wanted to like shoot the shit, right? And he'd be sitting there and all of a sudden he'd go, "Oh, I gotta go. There's somebody at the door." And I'm thinking, like, these people have been in our house. They know that the door isn't right by your mouth. Just like, "Oh,
That's
I gotta go get
funny.
that. The door's, someone's at the door." Like, always. He always had this little scam to get him out of being on the phone. It's just so funny to think about
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That
Now
popped
what
in
do
my
you
head.
do? You're like, oh, I got like another call coming in. Or like, what do you do?
It's so funny because
We don't fucking call people really that often. So
no. Well, I was thinking about this. I was like, my kids will never answer a phone. How weird is
yeah.
that? Like, they'll never know the joy of picking up a phone on a Saturday morning, and it's
Yeah.
your friend who's like, "Hey, you want to go do this?" And you're like, "Yeah." Or you're like, "You want to come over here?" And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah." They'll never
I
experience
remember
that.
like my parents saying, I don't know if it was 10 or 11. For some reason, I feel like it was 11, but it was like, you can't call them until it's 11 in the morning. Like if
Yes.
I wanted to go to my friend's
Yes.
house, I'd be like, okay, my parents would be like, yeah, that's fine, but you have to like wait until 11
Yeah.
o'clock to call. Like now, like they're talking, like kids are talking like at all hours of the night, like they got
Yeah.
their own phones. It's like there's no like limit. And
Yeah.
again, that's a very overbearing feeling. And I mean, maybe that's a little bit harder because we're old for us. I'm sure younger people have just been born into this, so like it's not that difficult maybe for them, maybe not the
Sorry,
same.
trains going by, my whole house is shaking again.
But like, yeah, when it's like, it's very, again, I think like, and I'm just making these connections as we're talking, to my point earlier about like all of the stimulation and like how suffocating that sort of feels
Yep.
for me. I think that's what I'm talking about with
Yeah.
like, but I'm getting like hammered with all these, and I love it. Like, at the same time, I love it. I want my friends to be reaching out and talking to me and including me in conversations, because I would be way more hurt if they weren't.
Yep.
But it's like, it's constant. It's like coming in, my emails filling up. I have like multiple conversations going at the same time. I'm trying to like connect with my husband. My kids are going to come home, and then they're just going to hammer me with questions and like things to do for the rest of the night, which is like a beautiful thing in itself, but also difficult to manage. Again, I think that's all part of like my triggers of like that overstimulation, that like that heaviness of like what I've had to work through.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's probably a piece of it, I'm guessing.
Oh, I would say so for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that's funny. That really escalated, eh?
Yeah. Hopefully people could follow along with that.
I think so. I mean, it's just raw talk, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what this is. You're watching.
I feel like there were some good lessons in there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just want to like, again, like point out that triggers are completely individual. There's really no specific way that they happen. It could be physical, mental, emotional, like the whole gamut.
Yep.
And they can manifest in different ways, and they can come up at different times into your life in different scenarios that you can likely understand after, but in the moment it tends to be difficult. And that like fear or anxiety or that like uncomfortableness that you feel, like that is normal. That is likely a trigger. That is something that you should probably revisit if you want to deal with that and not have that experience again. Reminding yourself that you're safe, reminding yourself that this scenario is different from what I've experienced in the past, and that I am in more control today than I was previously.
Well,
and
exactly.
Those will help you sort of move through those emotions and those feelings a little bit easier.
Well, that's the biggest thing that I learned, and this just came to me, was for the longest time, I always reacted to a trigger. Now I respond to a trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just going into that spiral, it's, you're about to step into the spiral, and then you're like, okay, let's respond to this by trading it out with a happiness trigger, right?
That's so huge. Yes. Responding instead of reacting.
Yeah.
That is like 100% the way forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely is.
Dealing with triggers. Definitely agree. That's a good one. Well, should we wrap it up there? If people have more questions or they want to talk more about this, like we'll happily revisit it.
Absolutely.
Happily, maybe. We will.
I don't know. This one made me really uncomfortable. I don't know if I'd be happy about revisiting
I hope you're feeling better.
I do actually feel better, which is really funny. I think maybe I just needed to spit it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're working through it. Yeah, for sure. And I hope that it does get a little bit easier over the coming days, and keep doing your Reiki, keep doing your practices. And in a couple of days, like you said, you'll feel a lot better for sure.
Yeah, I
think
give
yourself some grace to know that, it does take a little bit of time. These things.
Absolutely.
Because you're a cheerleader.
I appreciate this. No, I love it. It's wonderful. I do. I love it because I love you. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love you. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Yes.
If you want to see more about us and our love for each other, then join our Facebook community and follow us.
Please.
We appreciate all of it. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. We will see everybody in the next one.
Yes. See you in the next one.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit those subscribe and share buttons. We'll see you at the next one.